Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is Robert Greene. Robert Greene is an author who has written 5 best-selling books, including 48 Laws of Power, The Laws of Human Nature, and Mastery. He did his bachelor's training at the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Robert Greene's books are both unique and important for several reasons, not the least of which is that they explore the interaction between the psychology of self, self-exploration, and the psychology of human interaction, all rooted in history and modern culture, and at the same time in a way that pertains to everybody. I first learned about Robert's work from reading the book Mastery, which to my mind is a brilliant exploration and a practical tool for how to think about and pursue one's purpose. Whenever I'm asked for book suggestions, I always include Mastery in my top 3 recommendations. During today's discussion, we cover a wide range of topics, including how to find and pursue and achieve one's purpose. We talk about the selection of a life partner, as well as romantic and other types of relationships. We also discuss the topics of motivation, urgency, and this concept of death threat, which arose during our discussion of Robert's recent stroke. Robert's stroke rendered him certain limitations, but also has allowed him to explore writing, exercise, and how to interface with life in general in new ways that allow him to continue to expand his sense of purpose. I'm certain that by the end of today's episode, you'll glean tremendous amounts of new knowledge that will allow you to navigate forward along the path.
Head southeast toward Everett Road, then turn right onto Everett Road.
It's your relationship with yourself, with others, and indeed to the world around you. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast
Head northwest, then turn left.
It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Roca. Roca makes eyeglasses and sunglasses that are the absolute highest quality. I've spent a lifetime working on the biology of the visual system. I can tell you that your visual system has to contend with an enormous number of challenges in order for you to be able to see clearly. Roca understands those challenges and has designed their eyeglasses and sunglasses accordingly so that you always see with crystal clarity. Roca eyeglasses and sunglasses are designed with a new technology called float fit, which allows them to fit perfectly and not move around even when you're active. In fact, whenever I'm wearing my Roca eyeglasses or sunglasses, I usually forget that I'm wearing them. I happen to wear Roca eyeglasses at night when I drive or I'm eating at night, and I wear Roca sunglasses during the daytime if it's very bright, especially if I'm driving into sunlight. If you'd like to try Roca eyeglasses,
Turn left, then turn right.
that's roka.com and enter the code Huberman for 20% off your first order. Again, that's roka.com and enter the code Huberman at checkout. Today's episode is also brought to us by Helix Sleep. Helix Sleep makes mattresses and pillows for tailored.
Turn right toward Everett Road, then turn left onto Everett Road.
When you're sleeping well and enough, mental health is your problem. All stands to your best. One of the key things to getting a great night's sleep is to make sure that your mattress is tailored to your unique sleep needs. Helix Sleep has a brief 2-minute quiz that you can go to their website.
Turn left onto Everett Road.
Back, your side of your stomach, hot, cold, and maybe you don't know the answers to those questions, and that's fine. At the end of that 2-minute quiz, they will match you to a mattress that's ideal for your sleep needs. I sleep on the Dusk DUSK mattress, and when I started sleeping on a Dusk mattress about 2 years ago, I slept.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto the I-40 East ramp to Knoxville.
Take their 2-minute sleep quiz and they'll match you to a customized mattress for you. And you'll get up to $350 off any mattress order and 2 free pillows. Again, if interested, go to helixsleep.com/Huberman for $350 off and 2 free pillows. Today's episode is also brought to us by Waking Up. Waking Up is a meditation app that includes hundreds of meditation programs, mindfulness techniques, yoga nidra sessions, I started using the Waking Up app a few years ago because even though I've been doing regular meditation since my teens, and I started doing yoga nidra about a decade ago, my dad mentioned to me that he had found an app, the Waking Up app, which could teach you meditations of different durations and had a lot of different types of meditations to place the brain and body into different states, and that he liked it very much. So I gave the Waking Up app a try, and I too found it to be extremely useful because sometimes I only have a few minutes to meditate, other times I have longer to meditate, and indeed I love the fact that I can explore different types of meditation to bring about different levels of understanding about consciousness, but also to place my brain and body into lots of different kinds of states depending on which meditation I do. I also love that the Waking Up app has lots of different types of Yoga Nidra sessions. Those of you who don't know, Yoga Nidra is the process of lying very still but keeping an active mind. It's very different than most meditations, and there's excellent scientific data to show that Yoga Nidra and something similar to it called non-sleep deep rest, or NSDR, can greatly restore levels of cognitive and physical energy, even with just a short 10-minute session. If you'd like to try the Waking Up app, you can go to wakingup.com/Huberman and access a free 30-day trial. Again, that's wakingup.com/Huberman to access a free 30-day trial. And now for my discussion with Robert. Robert, I'm so happy you're here.
I'm really happy to be here, Andrew. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm sure it's great. In 2015, I was teaching a course to undergraduates. This was a big course, 450 students. This was when I was a professor at University of California, San Diego. I was about to go back to Stanford. But the course was entitled Neural Circuits and Health and Disease. But there was a final lecture where I would do a lot of Q&A with the students about science, about careers, about career paths, and what I found was that many of the students had questions about not just science, but about how to learn and forage for information. And I recommended 3 books at the end of the course. Every year that I taught it for 4 years.
Turn left onto the I-40 East ramp.
Longitude, which is a wonderful story about discovery of timekeeping devices at sea. One book I'll leave as a mystery, not to be mysterious, but because it's a science book. I'll just tell you what it is. It's Principles.
In a quarter mile, merge onto I-40 East.
It makes a better doorstop for most than a book, but it's a wonderful resource if you want to learn about neuroscience. And your book, Mastery. And the reason I recommend it, Mastery, is because these students are soon going to go into the great jungle of post undergraduate education, and for me, I found Mastery to be an absolutely transformative book in that it taught me so much about how to learn from others, how to expect certain types of interactions when one kind of assigns themselves to a mentor, and vice versa. And it talked about some things that we'll get into in more depth today, but not the least of which is about identifying that unique seed that exists within all of us that can guide our
Continue on I-40 East for 52 miles.
So I usually end with a great debt of gratitude, and I'll probably do that again at the end.
There's a stalled vehicle ahead.
My entire life, and in many ways this podcast probably wouldn't exist were it not for Mastery, because it really embedded in me this idea that we all have a deeper purpose, and it explains how to go about finding that purpose. So I tell you that, and I also would use that as a segue for asking you now, since I'm sure people's ears are pricked up to this, how do you find your purpose? Can you share with us what it is to find one's purpose, and how early life events perhaps can cue us to what that purpose is for each of us?
Well, thank you for that marvelous introduction. And I'm almost blushing. That's a fantastic story. Well, being a human being is not easy as opposed to an animal, because we're born and nobody gives us like a direction. Our parents might be a little bit, our college teachers, etc., mentors, but generally we're on our own. And it's a very, very difficult process. You wake up in the morning and you don't really know what you can do. You can choose 12 different paths. It can be very confusing and very overwhelming. When you find that sense of purpose, when you find what I call your life's task, everything has a direction. Everything has a purpose. Your energy is concentrated. It's not like you're just going down a single narrow pathway. It's not like life is boring and it's just about discipline and solving problems. It's actually the most exciting thing that can ever happen to you, because you never have that lost feeling. You wake up in the evening and you go, yeah, this is what I need to accomplish. People come at you with all kinds of distractions and boring and irritating things. You're able to cut it out. It's just the most marvelous piece of internal radar that you can have. So I life experiences with your parents and everything that you experience in your early years going on up is unique, it's yours. You're one of a kind, right? So that is your source of power. To waste that is just the worst thing you can do in your life. And what the power is finding that uniqueness, what makes you you, and how you can mine that, how you go deep into it and use that to create a career path, right? And so I tell people when you're a child, when you're 4 or 5 or even younger, you have what the great psychologist Maslow called impulse voices. They're little voices in your head that say, I love this, I hate that, I like this food, I don't like when mommy moves this way, I like when daddy comes here. You're very cued into who you are and what you like and what you don't like. And these voices kind of direct you in certain ways, right? And when you're very young, they direct you towards intellectual, mental pursuits as well. And there's a book I recommend for everybody. It's Howard Gardner's 5 Frames of Mind. It's helped me immensely. The idea is, he talks about 5 forms of intelligence. Our problem is we think of intelligence as mostly intellectual, but there are many forms of intelligence. There's the intelligence that has to do with words. There's abstract intelligence that has to do with patterns and mathematics. There's kinetic intelligence that has to do with the body. There's social intelligence. Yes, 5 of them. And the idea is your brain naturally veers towards one of them. You can veer towards 2 of them. This happens. But generally one of them kind of dominates, right? And it's like a grain in your brain that's going in a certain direction. You want to go with that grain, and because that's where your power will lie. So when you're young, if you go back and think about when you were 4 or 5, you can maybe get a picture of some kind of direction or voice inside of you that was impelling you towards this. I know for me, it was words. I can remember when I was 6 years old, I was just obsessed with words, just the letters in words, almost like in almost a slightly schizophrenic way. I would spell words backwards, I would take apart anagrams, palindromes, right? So I had a thing about words and language, very primal. Some people, Albert Einstein, when he was 4 years old, his father gave him a birthday gift of a compass. And he was just mesmerized by this compass. The idea that there are invisible forces out there in the cosmos moving this needle. And he's obsessed with the idea of invisible forces. Steve Jobs, when he was like 7 or 8 or maybe younger, in Burlington, California, his father had passed by a store with technological devices in the window. And he was just hypnotized by the design of those devices and the glass tubes and everything. So he wanted to go in that direction. Tiger Woods saw his father hitting golf balls in the garage, and he was just like screaming with joy. He had to do that, right? I can give you a million different examples of this. Of course, these are people who are famous, obviously. We can go back and find them. It's easier. But what happens to you? Please cut me off. I'm going on too long here. Please continue. What happens to you is you're 7, now you're getting older, and you're starting to not hear that voice anymore. You're hearing the voice of your teachers telling you, you're not good at this field, you need to get better at math. You shouldn't be interested in these sports, or you should go in this direction. Your parents are starting to tell you this is the career they want, or the direction they want you to go in, right? You start hearing that more than your own voice. As you get older, it gets worse and worse and worse. Then when you're a teenager, it's all about what other people are doing, your peers, what's cool, what's not cool, and that kind of gets more. So all of this noise enters your brain, and you can't hear that anymore. You don't know who you are. And so you go to college, you kind of maybe choose a major that seems practical, that your parents want you to go into. Maybe you kind of wander around, you're not sure. And then you enter the work world without that inner radar that I'm talking about. And brother, you're lost, right? Where should I go? Well, I need to make money, right? And so you make a choice based on the need to make a lot of money. Not everyone, but some people do that. And I understand that need. We all need to make a living. But that could set you off on a very bad path because you're not connected emotionally. The thing is, when you figure out that primal inclination, that grain that's inside of you, then you have the energy to be disciplined, to go through boring tasks, to learn. emotionally engaged in a subject, the brain learns twice, 3 times, 4 times as fast as when you're not. I always give the example. In college, I studied foreign languages, which was kind of a passion of mine. For 3 or 4 years, I studied French, and then I went to Paris, and I couldn't speak a word. It was useless because it didn't teach me anything practical, right? I was totally confused. And then, but I was in Paris, and I loved it, and I wanted to live there, right? And I had a girlfriend, and I needed to speak French to her. And I can tell you, in 1 month, I learned more than those 4 years of university because I wanted to, because I was engaged, my emotions were there. It was like I had to survive to learn French. Whereas, so most of us don't have a need really to learn the subject. We're paying half attention. But when you find the thing that really connects to you, you're paying deep attention, your emotions are engaged, you're learning at a much faster rate. Okay? So the thing is, how do you find that when you're older? When you're 21, I give people a lot of help, and it's usually not so difficult. We can go through that process. It gets harder when you're 30 and you can wander around, but it's not impossible. I didn't really start my exact path until I was 38, 39, to be honest. So there's a little, when you get to 40, your thinking gets more and more difficult, right? And it's very sad if you wasted that seed of uniqueness that I'm talking about. And I tell people there are ways of going back. We go through a process like archaeology. You have to dig and dig and dig and find those bones from your childhood that indicated what you were meant to do. But when you find your life's task, everything opens up. It doesn't mean you figured out, okay, I'm going to aim for this particular job when I'm 28. That's not how it works. It gives you a sense of direction. You can try different things. You can experiment. You can have fun when you're in your 20s. You're going to learn. You're going to learn skills. But it gives you an overall framework instead of this confusion, this chaos, social media, the internet. I can do here. You're lost at sea. It gives you a very important sense of direction, a compass.
As you describe this, I have this image of you mentioned animals that presumably don't have a lot of flexibility in terms of the niches they can exist in. But the way I imagine this process is that as a human, we're plopped into an environment. Here I'm using an analogy where we don't really know if we are an aquatic animal, a terrestrial animal, or an avian, right? Or an amphibian for that matter. And to make the wrong choice, right? To be an amphibian who's trying to fly, although I'm sure they're out there in the animal kingdom. It's not just a waste of time, it's probably deadly. And not to over-dramatize the failure of finding one's purpose, but I see it that way. Whereas perhaps we could just say that the process of finding one's purpose is to realize, like, I'm an amphibian. I can go in and out of the water, whereas a bunch of other creatures, when we stop at the water's edge, right? And this is really cool. And a bunch of these other things, like these flying things, they can't actually even go in the water. Right. Some of them might be on the surface or dive into it, but they can't dive in it. So the process of self-discovery, it sounds like it's about restricting one's choices to a sort of wedge within the full landscape of options. And for me, I can certainly recall, after reading Mastery, it helped me recall some early seed emotions that I experienced. This is a very distinct sensation in my body.
Describe.
Without making too specific to my unique taste. As a kid, I loved flora and fauna. I loved learning about biology. Sure. No surprise there. But animals and how they move in particular, and fish, and going to a proper aquarium store for the first time for me, and going snorkeling for the first time was like, wow. And even as I describe it, it's almost like my body floats. I feel it in my left arm of all things, and it feels like this. It's not just
There's a stalled vehicle ahead.
like me. Right? It's like there's an activation state created within me. Like, I gotta do something with this. And typically it's tell everybody about it until they won't listen anymore. But oftentimes it's to also draw those things, to think about them, and I just delight in them. It's a constant source of delight. And so seeds such as those, and there are a few other things in that landscape of flora and fauna, and learning about animals and biology, including the human animal, and then organizing information feels so satisfying to me. It's like a drug. And so it just feels like this, eternal spring of life, right? And so for me, that's what it was. And in 2015, when I was teaching that course, the course I loved, but I was feeling a little bit astray in my scientific career. And then I read Mastery. And I realized, yes, I love learning a laboratory out teaching, but there's something else for me. And it has to do not with podcasts. I didn't even know where I knew what a podcast was. I was listening to podcasts at that time, but when I was on social media, I know lots about making podcasts. But what I wanted was that feeling in its total number of forms. Or that's the goal. Get that feeling in as many forms as possible. Is that about?
That's absolutely perfect, because the connection to what I'm talking about, it's not an intellectual thing. It's visceral, it's emotional, it's physical, right? And you feel it in your body when you're doing it. It's like it's at your level. It's like you're swimming with the current. You feel things are easy. Everything clicks together. There's a delight. Not everything is going to be delightful. There's going to be tedium involved. There's going to be moments of boredom. But you're able to withstand the moments of boredom because you feel the deep overall connection. So yes, that's precisely what I'm talking about. I mean, for me, it's a little bit a similar thing. Is I said about words, but the other thing that I was obsessed with when I was a kid was early human ancestors. Don't ask me why. I just was so obsessed with our ancestors millions of years ago and how it was possible to be living here in the 60s or 70s with cars and everything, but to come to where we are now. I wrote a short story when I was 8 years old understand that because I love sports, is you have to practice. It's going to take a lot of. It's not. You're not going to instantly be good at something, right? And that's going to require a love of it, right? But if your math experience, I hate learning shit. You're not. It's going to transfer to sports. You're going to hate discipline in general. So it's very important for parents to let that child have at least glimmers of that love moment. I know for me, when I finished college, I got I had a job. I worked in journalism. I hated it. I hated working for other people. I hated office politics. I hated all the egos. I hated the smarminess. I hated the lack of quality. It was all just about, making money, getting things out there. And then I worked in a lot of it. I hated all of it. I hated working in a lot. That formed me very much. Made me go in the direction that I went in. But only from the basis of I knew that I wanted to be a writer. So, that's very important that it's not just, hey, it can form you, but there also has to be that positive, deep emotional love of something that also is grounded in you in some way.
And what you just said really highlights the fact that energy and motivation can come from either pressure, desire for something or desire to get away from something. And earlier we were talking about how we are so much more engaged and driven toward things that stir us emotionally, and actually we know based on the neuroscience, if you know too, I'm sure that only by release of certain neurochemicals in the brain and body would our brain have any reason to change, right? If you don't feel agitation and you can do everything you're trying to do, of course your brain wouldn't change. Like why wouldn't, right? That agitation is a signature of the neurochemicals that are saying, hey, something's different now.
Right.
You might need to do something different, including rewiring yourself, right? And that can come from positive or negative experiences. Now, I'm obsessed with this idea of energy. I mean, we all want to have more energy and focus. And normally we hear about the concept of energy in the context of caloric energy, like what should we eat and when and how much, and we need to get sleep. But what you're really referring to is neural energy, like the engagement of ourselves. That's sitting there ready to be engaged, but it requires the right experiential macronutrients, right? The experiential micronutrients, as opposed to, of course, we need good nutrition, but that's not sufficient. It's necessary, but not sufficient. So, would you say that when we are, let's say, since a good number of our listeners are in adulthood, from our 20s on, that the things that excite us as adults and really generate some readiness or grab our attention are still informative toward guiding our decisions about best life and life purpose?
Well, what exactly do you mean with that? I mean, because there are things that excite you in a kind of a quick way, where you have to relieve some tension, and there's entertainment, and there's things that kind of give you pretty immediate gratification. There's the larger picture of something that give you fulfillment over years to come. So you can feel that when you're older and you can pay attention to it. But a lot of the time is we're paying too much attention to the immediate pleasures of life, to what's this instant gratification, and that's what we're grabbing for. So this is a much more kind of deeper process that involves that digging, that saying, it's deeper than just kind of, I like this, I don't.
Me, as a neurobiologist who started off as a developmental neurobiologist, I can tell you that puberty is the most profound transformation that the brain undergoes in the entire lifespan. There's just absolutely no question about it. Everything is different after puberty because of all of the new relational dynamics that become apparent and our potential involvement in them. It's not talked about enough how dramatically puberty changes the brain. I mean, we are different people before and after puberty.
There's something raging.
The hormones are there. It's not just changes in how we view the world, but changes in how the world views us.
Yeah.
And not just through the lens of sexuality, but also expectation of what we are capable of, what we are responsible for, or not responsible for, our learning capacity. I mean, puberty is it's also the most rapid stage of aging in our entire lifespan. Those kids that go home for the summer come back like shaving, I was sort of late. I wasn't late bloomer. I had a long protracted puberty, but I remember those kids. I'm sure we all remember those kids. Everything changes, and so I think prior to puberty, the
Merge onto I-81 North.
Interiors of their ideas. You want to kind of digest them and then have them flow have your own ideas by interacting.
Head southeast toward Airport Parkway.
So,
Merge onto Tennessee 357 Airport Parkway, then make a U-turn at Hospitality Place.
kind of process, go deeper.
Make a U-turn at Hospitality Place, then turn right onto the I-81 North ramp.
Look, but it's the difference between dead thinking and alive thinking. Ideas can be either alive or they can be dead. And an alive idea is something that enters your brain from an external source, a philosopher, an article, somebody you admire, somebody you hate, and then you absorb it, and you think about it, and you decide, I'm going to turn it around into this, and I'm going to make it alive, make it something that's part of me. Another part of an alive idea is you have an idea that comes to you about a book or a project or something about the world, and you go, maybe that's not actually true. Maybe the opposite is true. And you go through a process and you cycle through it on and on, and you reflect on it and you refine this idea. And maybe it turns into its opposite. And through the process of reflecting and correcting and revising it, you turn it into something living, something alive, right? On and on and on. And we're people can go into that process. The subject of my book is basically because I think how handle anxiety is the most important quality that will determine whether you will be successful, whether you will find your career path.
Head east on Hospitality Place toward Millennium Drive, then turn right onto Millennium Drive.
Anxiety is a signal
Turn right onto Millennium Drive.
problem out there that you can't resolve.
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto Shipley Ferry Road.
Secure is you climb on something is easy to get rid of your feeling of anxiety. I don't understand this problem. Oh, it must be A. A must be the answer because this person said that, right? And so you don't develop the empathy. You don't develop the next level. But anxiety will go. Right?
Turn right onto Shipley Ferry Road, then turn left onto Airport Extension.
Be able to surmount your anxiety and go past further and further and further. Don't rush the first available answer that's out there, right? You're able to go through a process of refining things. And so, in your career, if you're anxious for success, if you're anxious for money, you're making the wrong choices. If you're able to deal with that anxiety and say, maybe I'm not thinking about where I'm going and come up with other alternatives. And
Turn left onto Airport Extension, then turn right onto Tennessee 357.
person. It's very, very challenging to have that blank piece of paper before you, that book that you haven't written, that filled with anxiety. You have to deal with it. And if you're able to turn it into something creative, then we're done. And great things will happen. You're creative. So, the ability to deal with anxiety and not be exposed is incredible. And to me, the more incredible something
Turn right onto Tennessee 357 Airport Parkway.
cycle of dead ideas.
Amen to that. I was once told that anxiety makes children up as not in a lot of sense.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto the I-81 North ramp to Bristol.
Manage anxiety. Don't want to dance. Because we can't rid ourselves of it enough. Or should we? It's a signal as to how we don't understand something that is or something that you're curious about. Or process or something out there. That really resonates. Yeah, I think we're better than hearing that because I think it can be here. But just imagine. I can catch myself imagining that, when Robert Greene sits down to write, it's like there's a blank sheet, and then he just kind of meditates, and then boom, out come these books. But putting it realistic for a second, I'm sure that there's a lot of inner turmoil and anxiety. I have no idea.
So my process is 95% pain and maybe 2.5% ecstasy, and I don't know what the other 2.5% would be. But so I write a story because in my new book and most of my books I always begin with the story from the etc. And it is so bad. I can't believe how flat it is, how it sucks. I'm so embarrassed. I hate myself. And I go and I dig it and I start changing the word. I start making it a little better. The second version, it's kind of palatable, but it still sucks. It's the island that I'm going to be.
Turn right onto the I-81 North ramp, then merge onto I-81 North.
I'm miserable when that happens. Everything's flat. And I'm pushed on. So if I need anything to my anxiety, I used to have a lot of books and books, and I would just put up in the second grade. Just very strong.
In a quarter mile, make a U-turn.
But I think when I went the first time I go, that's not real. It's not the actual thing that's going on here. But you miss the mark. Finding out what's actually real in that story. So you have to go deeper and deeper and harder and harder and harder. So I don't just give up and go, here's the chapter. It's gotta be better. It's gotta be better. Until finally, after 2 months,
Make a U-turn.
it's tough. That I want to do. Right? And I use that anxiety to keep improving and make it better. But then when I reach that point of the story is good enough and I let it run my brain and then my head turns, I feel pretty good about it.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto the I-81 North ramp to Bristol.
But I can tell you,
Head northwest on Airport Parkway toward Router Road. Continue for 1 mile.
any kind of drug experience anyone has ever had, it's such a wonderful feeling of accomplishment, pushing past all the barriers. You know, so my process involves a lot of things like, that's what I'm talking about, what do I really know?
For sure. I'm attempting to write a book and have been for several years. Now I feel a little bit better, but clearly I didn't imagine that.
Head west toward Router Road.
Definitely
In 500 feet, turn right onto Airport Parkway.
lots of anxiety and just, okay, I'm gonna just get to this one milestone and then I'll figure out the next milestone. But even that process of saying, okay, I'm gonna bring this
Turn right onto Airport Parkway.
it just then at some point generates enough inertia. You just sort of stumble forward into the process and then keep going. So trying to letting myself too much. I think a lot of people will benefit from hearing about that. In fact, I'm certain they will. So speaking of anxiety, you have a clip.
In a quarter mile, turn left onto the I-81 North ramp to Bristol.
Absolutely fabulous about how to find a partner and or get more out of an existing romantic partnership.
I don't remember what I said, you don't have to move on. No, it's so good.
When you put it there, then I remember that I think is oh so true is that there needs to be at least one and probably several of points of
power in life. So tools are fine. We all need tools. We all need hammers, we need nails, we need saws, etc. But the real thing is the hand that uses it, the brain that connects the hand to the hammer, that knows how to hit things. You know, I think of the great painter Renoir in the 19th century. He had like a stroke or something in the last years. He couldn't move his right arm, which he painted with. It was disastrous. So what he did is he put the brush in his mouth and he painted some beautiful paintings that way because his brain had mastered the art of painting, not his hand, but his brain had mastered it so well that he could actually paint well with the brush in his mouth because he could direct it. He had the knowledge of how to make something perfect. The brain is absolutely incredible. The plasticity of the brain, which I'm discovering after my stroke, is absolutely astounding. I don't know, it's Professor Schwartz at UCLA studying OCD. Now he was able to kind of cure people with OCD through certain plasticity exercises that he had, making them aware of their kind of brain lock instead of getting them out of it. That plasticity of the brain is far from this miracle, and it goes on into the 60s to 70s and on onward. Let's all get down on our hands and knees and worship the brain. If we did, it would create a complete shift in our values, and we wouldn't be so instantly seduced and enamored and worshiping the technology. We would worship the brains that create the technology instead of, the other way around.
So I got a fan of brains and their potential for plasticity sitting over here. I'm a fan that my scientific great-grandparents are Hugo and Weasel won the Nobel Prize for neuroplasticity during the critical period. So my scientific great-grandparents are David Hugo and Torsten Weasel. David's dead, Torsten's still alive, he's 96, and they won the Nobel Prize for essentially discovering the critical window early development where plasticity is especially robust. They did other things, frankly, for their other work on vision. But one thing that they missed, however, was something that you mentioned and is worth highlighting again, which is that the brain maintains capacity for immense plasticity throughout the entire lifespan. It's absolutely clear. The conditions change from early to later in life, but your specific situation really highlights that, and it's something I'd really like to talk about for a few minutes if you're willing. As you mentioned, you experienced a stroke, and perhaps it was aware to some, but perhaps not to all, especially the people just listening to this podcast and who are not watching on video, that your shirt you're wearing nicely designed in its original state also includes some unique stitching. So maybe you could share with us what, and for those listening, there's a jagged line of stitching that extends from Robert's left short sleeve to his midline to where the buttons on his shirt are, and from his right short sleeve also to the midline, offset from one another. This is the sort of stitching that looks like perhaps I had been in a sewing machine, and not somebody who's skilled but did a good job putting it back together. Why are those stitches in your shirt? Tell us about the stroke, and let's talk about neuroplasticity.
It could also seem like a fashion statement, but it really isn't. Well, it was May of 2018. It was my birthday, and my wife gave me this shirt. I have a love of plaids. It's like, I don't know why, I just love patterns, and plaids must be like some Scotch part of me, some ancestral thing, but I love plaids.
Can I interrupt you just briefly? Forgive me, everyone's going to get upset that I interrupted you. Know that there is a fundamental circuit in your visual cortex designed to detect plaid pattern. Yes, when you talk about it, it's tightly linked to your ability to perceive motion. Yeah, we can go over it some other time, but yeah, so we'll
to the hospital. And I'm unconscious, and I wake up, and I'm in a gurney in the hospital. And for a moment, I think maybe I'm dead because I'm lying in a gurney and I don't feel like I'm in a coffin. I don't know what's going on. And I have all of these weird sensations. And I tell people, we're so curious about death, about death, why and what's the meaning. And I think you should pay attention to dying. Dying is actually much more interesting in some ways than death. And people who have died go through a process if it's long enough. And people who have had near-death experiences like I do have gone through that process of dying and have come back to life. And in the process of dying, strange things happen to the brain, right? So particularly with a stroke or something like that, where blood stops flowing to your, oxygen stops flowing to your brain, you have kind of visions, things that you might think are hallucinations, but that later seem like actually you are actually glimpsing the reality as opposed to the illusion that the brain creates. So I've written about this in my new book, but my idea of the brain is that it creates endless series of illusions for you. It creates this seamless version of reality, the sense of a self, the sense of a continuous self of time, right? It creates a linear sense of time progressions. It creates colors, creates a world visually that seems familiar, etc., etc. But it's all illusion. It's all a construction, right? Images come into your brain and they're not organized in any way, and the brain organizes in a way that you can understand it. Well, when you're dying, all of that scrambles up, and you actually are seeing something else. So I saw feeling something from the outside. I don't really know the answer to that because it's very confusing. The other feeling I had was life, when I was having a stroke, was life draining out of me and my bones getting softer and softer and softer. And I can't really logically explain that feeling of bones softening up and dissolving. But for weeks and months afterwards, I can access that feeling of my bones dissolving, etc. It's a feeling of all your energy draining out of you and you're dying, literally. So, reading books about near-death experiences, because that's a lot of what I've been part of my newest book. God, it's fascinating. There's so many interesting things to know because it teaches us so much.
I'm so glad that A, you survived your stroke, B, that your mental faculty is something more grateful than I am. I'm probably not, but still very grateful. So there, just illustrates how grateful you must be. B, that you maintain, if not grow, your mental faculty. So you're extremely sharp. I promise you, you're not missing a beat. One always wonders, right? Actually, one of the most common fears people have is that somehow they're losing their mind or their memory, and people aren't, and they aren't aware of it. I have family members who have asked that if they ever start to exhibit signs of severe dementia, that I put an end to them, which I won't. That's not my place in this world. But I think it's a common fear. But you're still extremely sharp, and thank goodness for it. And you mentioned that while you lost certain abilities, that new appreciation and new abilities have surfaced. Can you perhaps share what some of those are and what they mean to you? Because I think that when one hears about somebody having a stroke, we tend to focus on what's lacking, but clearly this has been a transformative experience, also positive.
Well, I had to confront some of my own demons. I had to confront the sense that I expected things out of life, and here they're taken away, and I'm kind of ungrateful for being alive, and here I'm pissed off that it takes me 10 minutes to tie my shoes, and I can't really button my shirt. I had to learn what really matters, and have patience and stuff. The other thing was, I used to love hiking. I was very physically active. I'm sitting at my window in my office. God, I'm so envious. And if I could walk a dog right now, I'd be the happiest person alive. But then I go through a thought process which maybe is completely healthy, which is they're not aware of how wonderful it is just to walk a dog. But I'm aware of it. So when I go out in my backyard and I can't walk, and I'm seeing, like, I know this is going to sound really triacly and sentimental, but I see, butterflies and things in my garden. I'm like, wow, that's incredible. Things like that I couldn't appreciate before because I'm sedentary and I have to suddenly pay attention to what's around me, not take it for granted, and find and suck all the pleasure out of it that I can. So now, when I sit at my desk to write my new book, it's 4 hours because that's all I can stand, maybe 3 sometimes. Those 4 hours are like such bliss for me. I truly appreciate it now because I know that my brain was almost gone, right? So it means so much for me. And to just be alive, is just a wondrous experience. I have a chapter in my new book called Awakening the Strangeness of Being Alive. And it's about the fact that if you think about it and how unlikely it is that we humans evolve at all, even that we even exist, all the complex evolution that we had to pass through, including the disappearance of the dinosaurs and the emergence of mammals, but there are 20 other huge bottlenecks throughout the history of evolution. We had to pass through all of those. We nearly went extinct 80,000 years ago from some virus that infected there were only 8,000 humans on the planet. All these different things. And here we are with phoenix, etc., etc. It's like the strangest story we've ever done. It's beyond science fiction. But nobody thinks about it. Nobody sits down and goes, God, I'm alive. If you went back to the chain that had to connect and have children, leading up to your parents, the unlikeliness of you ever being born is astronomical. I mean, unless my science is mean, unless I'm missing something, it's pretty unlikely. But nobody thinks about it. Well, I certainly think about it now.
Head southeast toward Nicks Creek Road.
But I have nothing else to think about.
In a quarter mile, merge onto I-81 North.
Entertain himself by observing people. So it's taken a lot away from me. I can't swim. I'm riding my recumbent bike, which I love, and 80-year-old grandmothers are zipping by me. And God damn, how awful! I'm so envious. My insecurities all well up. Then I realize, hey, I'm like on a boat. I'm sailing. It's wonderful. I'm outside. You know, I have to go through these processes, but I think it's developed me in some way that's in the end very positive.
Sounds like you had to adjust to a new frame rate on life. Like the old movie had a certain frame rate.
Head northwest on Nicks Creek Road.
Frame rate. Whatever
In 1,000 feet, turn right onto US 11 North.
version of something. Is that about?
Yeah, but also like I tell people this. I totally took my life for granted. I was swimming all this time. It was fantastic. I was bicycling. I was traveling. But I never sat back and thought, wow, this is wonderful.
Turn right onto US 11 North.
I tell people, don't do that to yourself. I try and teach them. It can be taken away from you tomorrow. When you're out walking the dog, think of me. Think of me that can't walk the dog and appreciate those things, which I didn't appreciate. So I try and help people in that way when I can. You know?
I think
Continue on US 11 North for 4 miles.
inspire a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
You know, I think people hear sense of urgency and they go, oh God, I'm already under so much pressure, life's so hard. But we're not talking about a sense of urgency to take on more of what life has to offer. I think we're talking about a sense of urgency to find one's purpose, which takes work and is an ongoing process, but to really get out of modes of apathy, laziness, languishing, and to start, as you've described it, paying deeper attention. I mean, this is a concept that was
Head east toward US 11 South.
about, and I've learned about it from you, was how do you get yourself out of a rut? You start paying deeper attention.
Head south toward Nicks Creek Road.
And perhaps not coincidentally, you refer to that as, quote, death ground.
Yeah. So it's a strategy from my book. I wrote a book on strategy, my version of the art of war, called 33 Strategies of War, where it's really about strategy, the strategic thinking. It's inspired from Sun Tzu, the great Chinese strategist, but it has vast philosophical implications. The idea is, you can almost think of it like barometric pressure. When necessity is pressing in on you, like your back is against the wall, like you have to get something done, and there's like this pressure around you, you find energy in there that you never believed before. William James talks about this, and when he talks about getting a second wind, he explains it very eloquently. When you feel like your life's in danger, suddenly you can leap over things that you never could leap over before. So Sun Tzu says, put an army on death ground and it will fight until it wins. Meaning, put an army with its back to the ocean or back to the mountain, and it's either win or die. They're going to fight 10 times harder. You're going to find the energy in you that you normally lack. When death is facing you in the face, or urgency, or deadlines, or people pressing in on you, when that barometric pressure loosens up and there's none of it, you think you have all the time in the world, you get nothing done. Wow, man, I'm 23. I've got all these years ahead of me. I'm going to figure it out, right? I'm not going to die. I got 50, 70, 80 years ahead of me. No, you don't. That pressure now is gone, and you're wasting time. You're doing all sorts of things that aren't leading to any kind of skill. You're not learning or anything. You need to put yourself on death ground. You need to feel that barometric pressure, which is the actual reality. The actual reality is you could die tomorrow. You could have a stroke tomorrow. You could be fired tomorrow. Everything could fall apart. You need to have that sense of urgency now, because that's the reality. You're fooling yourself by thinking you have all this time. And so when you feel that pressure, suddenly you can move mountains. You have energy. Your life, you just have focus, etc. neurologically everything clicks in, you know. And people who've had that experience where they felt like the ship was going under and they better get their act together and survive, they talk about all these physical processes. I have a story in my new book. I hope I'm not boring you. Folks.
No, please, quite the opposite.
About a mountain climber who he was climbing this mountain by himself, and he was having a great time, but there was a storm coming and he had to get down, and he suddenly fell and he cut his leg open massively, and there was like a branch sticking in it, and he broke all these bones, and he was gonna die. He was on a ledge. You could see that it was getting dark, and storm clouds were massing. This was in the Rocky Mountains. He was alone, and suddenly he managed to get up on his 2 feet, and he can't explain how, but all of this energy, all this adrenaline started flowing in him. And he said he was like a mountain goat. He was like going down the ledge. He jumped. He was able to kind of get down to another ledge. He got out of it. And for the next 20 years, it was haunted by, how did that happen? I want that feeling again, because it was actually the most ecstatic feeling. I had energy that I never suspected in myself. And so he tries everything to get that feeling back. He tries climbing other mountains. He tries going to Mount Everest. He tries it, and it doesn't come back. And finally, he kind of figures out the formula for it and why it happened. He studies a lot of neuroscience. It's a great book. I'm using it in my new book. It's called Bone Games. It's a very interesting book. A lot of science in it. And he got the feeling back in a smaller sense, but it was the feeling of, life is in danger. I better get my act together or it's the end. And suddenly, adrenaline, dopamine, all the other things were occurring in him, and he got it, and he found that energy. So that's the ultimate kind of death ground right there.
The human will to live is truly incredible. And so now I have to say, as I said before, I'm so grateful that your stroke didn't take you out. Because clearly there's still so much in there, and you're continuing to share what is really exquisitely useful knowledge. It's just kind of astonishing to me. I started off today's discussion expressing my gratitude for what you've already done for my life and for the lives of so many other people through your books. It's clear you've been on a foraging exploration, and that foraging for organizing and communicating information, mainly in the form of written books, but also online content. You have a terrific YouTube channel, which I've subscribed to and follow and listen to with rapt attention. And the other venues with which you share information, including this one today, are really, truly valuable and appreciated. So I want to say on behalf of myself and for those that have known you and your work for a number of years, but also for the many people that are now sure to know who you are and what you're about, that it's just so clear that like this stuff comes from the heart, and that whatever early seed planted this, that we're all grateful for and better off as a consequence of that seed. So I could make this list very, very long with the number of specific ways in which you've improved the journey through life and made it clearer. I mean, life certainly can be hard, but it also can be really confusing. And that the Robert Greene roadmap, even though it's but one roadmap, is an extremely valuable map to have and to use. It certainly has been for me. So just an enormous thank you, Robert. Thanks for sharing today, and thanks for all you do and all that you're still doing and sure to do in the future.
Oh, thank you. I wish I could find the word for explaining the kind of weird emotions that I'm feeling when I hear it. There isn't, maybe Yiddish, maybe verklempt or something, I don't know, but thank you, yeah.
We'll have to have you back here again when your next book comes out. Can't wait, but we will wait.
Okay, yeah, hopefully I'm still around.
I'm confident you will.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Come back again.
Thanks very much. I hope I will.
Thank you for joining me for today's discussion with Robert Greene. I hope you found the conversation to be as stimulating as I did. If you're learning from and or enjoying this podcast, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's a terrific zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on both Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. Please also check out the sponsors mentioned at the beginning and throughout today's episode. It's the best way to support this podcast. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast, or guests or topics that you'd like me to consider for the Huberman Lab podcast, please put those in the comment section on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Not on today's episode, but on many previous episodes of the Huberman Lab podcast, we discuss supplements. While supplements aren't necessary for everybody, many people derive tremendous benefit from them for things like improving sleep, for hormone support, and for focus. To see the supplements discussed on the Huberman Lab podcast, you can go to Live Momentous, spelled O-U-S, so that's livemomentous.com/Huberman. If you're not already following me on social media, I am Huberman Lab on all social media platforms. So that's Instagram, X, Threads, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And on all those platforms, I discuss science and science-related tools, some of which overlaps with the content of the Huberman Lab podcast, but much of which is distinct from the content on the Huberman Lab podcast. Again, it's Huberman Lab on all social media platforms. If you haven't already subscribed to our monthly Neural Network newsletter, the Neural Network newsletter is a zero-cost monthly newsletter that includes podcast summaries as well as toolkits. The toolkits are brief PDFs that you can download that give you tools for things like neuroplasticity and learning, for managing dopamine, for enhancing sleep, for physical performance, flexibility, deliberate cold exposure, and on and on. To join the Neural Network newsletter, you simply go to hubermanlab.com, go to the menu tab, scroll down to newsletter, and enter your email. We do not share your email with anybody. Thank you once again for joining me for today's discussion with Robert Greene. And last, but certainly not least, thank you for your interest in science. Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. My guest today is Dr. James Hollis. Dr. James Hollis is a Jungian psychoanalyst and author of more than 17 books about the self, relationships, and how to create the best possible life. Some of the notable titles and topics of those books include Creating a Life, Finding Your Individual Path, as well as The Eden Project, In Search of the Magical Other, which, as the name suggests, is about relationships. He has also written about how to access our most resilient self in the book entitled Living Between Worlds, Finding Personal Resilience in Changing Times. During today's discussion, Dr. Hollis teaches us what questions we need to ask of ourselves on a regular basis in order to best understand who we really are and what we most desire at the level of vocation, romantic relationships, friendship, and family, and indeed in relationship to life's journey. What you'll quickly realize during today's discussion with Dr. Hollis is that while yes, he is trained as a Jungian psychoanalyst, he is also very firmly grounded in practical tools. That is, he teaches us the simple and yet practical tools that we can each and all apply on a daily basis in order to make sure that we are staying on our best path. We discuss how family dynamics that we grew up in, as well as trauma and attachment styles, combine with our unique gifts and indeed our shadow side as well, in order to drive us down particular trajectories in life that sometimes lead us where we want to go, but other times lead us astray. And when they do, how to get back on track. Today's conversation with Dr. Hollis is truly a special one in that he rarely does podcast appearances. In fact, we traveled to him to record this podcast. That's how motivated I was to be able to sit down with him, because I'm familiar with his many books and his incredible teachings, but I really wanted to get his knowledge collected in one format, in one place. And what I can promise you is that by the end of today's podcast, you will be thinking differently about yourself, about the people in your life, and indeed, life itself. Before we begin, I'd like to emphasize that this podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. Our first sponsor is Matina. Matina makes loose-leaf and ready-to-drink yerba mate. Now, I've long been a fan of yerba mate as a source of caffeine, in part because of its high antioxidant content, as well as its ability to elevate glucagon-like peptide 1, GLP-1 or GLP-1, which leads to a slight appetite suppressing effect, as well as its ability to regulate blood sugar and possible neuroprotective effects. I also just happen to love the way that yerba mate tastes. I'll sometimes drink it hot by pouring hot water over the loose leaf yerba mate, and I'm particularly fond these days of drinking the zero sugar cold brew Matina yerba mate that I helped develop. Now, I realize that there are a lot of different brands of loose leaf and canned and bottled yerba mate out there, but the reason I like Matina the most is, first of all, it has absolutely the best taste of all of them. Secondly, they only use their organic ingredients. And thirdly, because they offer low sugar and zero sugar varieties. If you'd like to try Matina, you can go to drinkmatina.com/Huberman. That's spelled drink MATEINA.com/Huberman. Right now, Matina is offering a free 1-pound bag of loose leaf yerba mate tea and free shipping with the purchase of 2 cases of their cold brew yerba mate. Again, that's drinkmatina.com/Huberman. Today's episode is also brought to us by Juve. Juve makes medical grade red light therapy devices. Now, if there's one thing that I've consistently emphasized on this podcast, it's the incredible impact that light, meaning photons, can have on our mental health and physical health. Red and near infrared light has been shown to have profound effects on improving cellular health, which can help with faster muscle recovery, boosting healthier skin, reducing pain and inflammation, enhancing sleep, and much more. What sets Juve apart is that it uses clinically effective wavelengths, emits a safe and effective dose of red and near infrared light, and most importantly, offers the only true medical grade red light panel available. I personally try to use the handheld Juve Go unit, as it's called, every day, and especially when I'm on the road traveling. If you'd like to try Juve, you can go to juve.com/Huberman. That's JOOV.com/Huberman. Juve is offering an exclusive discount to Huberman Lab podcast listeners with up to $400 off Juve products. Again, that's juve.com/Huberman. Today's episode is also brought to us by BetterHelp. BetterHelp offers professional therapy with a licensed therapist carried out online. I've been going to therapy for well over 30 years. Initially, I didn't have a choice. It was a condition of being allowed to stay in school. But pretty soon I realized that therapy is extremely valuable. In fact, I consider doing regular therapy just as important as getting regular exercise, cardiovascular exercise and resistance training, which of course I also do every week. The reason I know therapy is so valuable is that if you can find a therapist with whom you can develop a really good rapport, you not only get terrific support for some of the challenges in your life, but you also can derive tremendous insights from that therapy. Insights that can allow you to better not just your emotional life and your relationship life, but of course also the relationship to yourself and to your professional life, to all sorts of career goals. In fact, I see therapy as one of the key components for meshing together all aspects of one's life and being able to really direct one's focus and attention toward what really matters. If you'd like to try BetterHelp, go to betterhelp.com/Huberman to get 10% off your first month. Again, that's betterhelp.com/Huberman. And now for my discussion with Dr. James Hollis. Dr. James Hollis, such an honor and a pleasure to sit down with you. I'm a huge fan of your writing, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a privilege to be with you.
Thank you. Let's talk about the self. This is something that I think people occasionally wonder about. You know, who am I? We wake up every day, we have some stable representation of who we are in our name most of the time, and we develop a self, a story based on what we know about our parents, our siblings, our life. From the perspective of Jungian psychology, maybe psychology generally, how should we think about ourselves?
Well, first of all, the idea of the self with a capital S, to distinguish it from the ego consciousness, that is to say, my conscious presence, as you and I are talking right now, is a transcendent other. It's a mystery. It's essentially governed by our instincts. You know, it's nature seeking its own expression and its own healing. What I've seen in terms of the activity of the self through the years, it has 2 agendas. One, healing when injured, and secondly, expressing itself in the same way that the acorn becomes the oak tree, so to speak. Now, the ego, of course, is that little scintilla of energy that begins to cluster. We're born without an ego, but then there's several shards of experience between the me and the not me that slowly accumulate, almost in tidal pools, so that I begin to differentiate myself from the other, my mother, let's say, or my father, or the object that is there. And you're right, we are an animal that seeks to understand as part of our adaptation to the world. And so we are narrative animals. We create stories about it. And our stories rise out of what we're experiencing at the moment. So you can see why a person born into a certain culture or a certain family of origin with its style of relating or disrelating, as the case may be, becomes the ground for defining that person's sense of self. So it's important to distinguish between the self and one's sense of self. The sense of self is who I think I am. At any given moment, that's very fluid, of course. Now, we have all kinds of internal clusters of energy. They're called complexes, a term that Jung popularized. And complexes are splinter personalities, he said. So a person might say, why did I get so upset yesterday? What came over me? Or I don't know what I was thinking when I made this important decision. And that's our recognition that we were in an altered state at that moment, that something within us had been triggered, had sufficient energy to come up, usurp ego consciousness, and take it over. Actually, the term that Jung used in German meant possession. It's a state of psychic possession temporarily. You know, we joke that lovers are fools or lovers are blind. So we know that people are in a certain, they're caught in a certain projection onto the other. And, you know, that ultimately gets, resolved into some sort of reality through time and experience with that individual. But in that state of being, one senses that one's making the right decision. And no one wakes in the morning and says, for example, well, today I think I'm going to do the same stupid, counterproductive things I've done for decades, but there's a good chance we will. Why? Because we have certain clusters of energy in us that are regularly triggered. When triggered, they catalyze a response in the ego that enacts that program. So it affects our body, it affects our script, and of course it affects our perception of self and world. So, you know, from the standpoint of therapy, one of the things we try to do is suggest to people you're not what happened to you, because one of our tendencies is to internalize whatever's happening to us. And thinking of that defines us. Of course, the younger, the less formed we are, the more we're likely to be defined by poverty or by disease or by alcoholism or by sexism or whatever the social constructs are into which we're born, as well as the psychodynamics of the family of origin. So in those circumstances, we all have a provisional sense of self. And if you have a culture that says this is who you are, this is what your orders are, your marching orders, here's your script, and the more authoritarian the culture, or the more traumatic one's environmental situation and family of origin, the more likely I'm going to be reacting to that. So when I've had an experience, I'm either going to repeat it, or I'm going to try to run from it, or maybe I'll be spending my life trying to treat it in some way that I'm not aware of. This activates many people into the healing professions, by the way, whether it's clergy, nursing, therapy, etc., etc. That's often a sensitive child in the family who feels I have to try to stabilize my environment in order to sort of get things back to a normal state, whatever that might be, so that then it could be there for me. But of course that never quite happens. You know, the child can't fix a parent, you see. And so many people in the helping professions are driven there by a powerful internalized message, which becomes their sense of self. So it's a long-winded way of saying there's a distinction between the self, which is the natural organic development of this organism. You know, as we're speaking, it's growing our toenails, digesting our breakfast, mentating, emoting, and so forth. Most of that's autonomous activity. It's kind of like the centipede. You know, you congratulate the centipede on how well he coordinates all of his legs, and then he thinks, well, should I move this leg or this leg or this? And he's immobilized. These are not functions that we govern consciously, although we can interrupt them consciously. But something is there taking care of us. It's an organic unity, and that's what Jung meant by the self, capital S. Our sense of self is a different matter. And so one of the things that I've tried to emphasize in therapy is you're not what happened to you. because we tend to be bound to our story that says either that's who I am, that's what I'm defined by, or I'm spending my life trying to differentiate myself from that, get away from that, perhaps. So, again, our sense of self is very provisional. It evolves, and in any given moment, there may be something in the unconscious that's triggered. And of course, the problem with the unconscious, it's unconscious. So I don't know that it's happened. I have the unconscious triggered. It has the power to rise, take over provisionally, spin out its program, and then after a while, it recedes back into the unconscious. And as I said, sometimes people will stop and say, well, I wonder what was behind that decision, or why did I choose that path, or what in me is blocking me from doing what I know is right for me. As Paul said in the letter to the Romans, though I know the good, I do not do the good. Well, why not? Well, he saw it as insufficiency of will. But we know it's more than that. We know that there are unconscious factors at work that have a certain autonomy. And the more unconscious they are, the greater their autonomy will prove to be.
If they are unconscious and they're driving us sometimes into states, other times traits, and that's perhaps an interesting discussion in and of itself. It's, what's the difference between a state of mind and body and a trait? But if it's unconscious, what chance do we stand to overcome these things? How does the awareness come about? Can we do it on our own? Does it require reflection from a trained professional? And if so, when we become conscious of something, does that immediately flip a switch? Or does it require constant returning to, seeing and forcing the unconscious to become conscious over and over again?
Sure. Well, those are great questions. First of all, again, none of us rises saying we're going to be counterproductive today, but we will because of the autonomy of those clusters of energy within us. Now, I've said to many people who've asked that question, well, start with your own life. Look to the patterns that you have. A pattern is an indication of some cluster of energy, whether it's outward or whether it's inward, that you're carrying with you. And we don't do crazy things. We always do logical things if we understand that what we're in service to intrapsychically. To give you an example, I was working in a closed ward of a hospital many decades ago, and there was a fellow repeatedly trying to break a window. People were assuming he was trying to escape or get a shard of glass for some nefarious purpose, and no one bothered to ask him why he was doing this. And he said he had the delusion that he was, first of all, in a locked ward, so he was caught in a non-voluntary situation. And in his psychosis, he felt that somebody was pumping air from the room. Now, if this door was locked and the air is being pumped out of this room, the most logical thing we would do is break through a window or break down the door. So his behavior was logical based on the premise. Now, the premise is often inaccurate or tied to one place but gets extrapolated to another one somewhere else. And then we are responding logically to that premise. So you start with your own life, particularly the places where you find these are self-defeating behaviors or behaviors that are hurtful to you and someone else. And then you say, since that's not my conscious intention, and yet there it is as part of my history, then I have to say, all right, what is it within me that, has the kind of power to take over my ego consciousness? Now, just to back off for a moment here, I think we're only conscious in the ego dealing with reality a few times during the course of a day. My favorite analogy is when you get up in the morning and you step in the shower, it's too hot or too cold, so you change the water temperature. Well, that's the ego in its proper function. It's being adaptive to its reality. It's being protective at that moment. It's achieving the optimum situation for you. But from the rest of the time on, when that same ego is flooded by other material, some of which is conscious, who gets the kids today after school, how do I get to the work on time, etc. But underneath that are other drivers that have to do with fear-based responses or adaptive responses that were perhaps once protective, but later, we weren't born with them. but we acquired them along life's highway. So what was once protective often becomes constrictive later, and creates those patterns. So number one, you start with your patterns. Secondly, and everyone sort of laughs at this, but there's a certain truth, is you might talk to those around you, such as your spouse or your closest partner or your children, and ask them about what they see in us, if you can bear to hear what they have to say. And to say, where is it you see me being hurtful to myself or others, or where is it that I get in your face in an inappropriate way? And then we usually have something to inform us with. Thirdly, we pay attention to our dreams, because we don't choose to dream, but sleep research tells us that we average about 6 dreams per night, and that's a lot of activity. Nature doesn't waste energy, it's processing something. And it's not just processing. If we pay attention over time, you begin to realize it has a point of view. Another way of putting this is the psyche, which is the term I would use here, and that's the Greek word for soul, by the way. The psyche, has its own intentionality. It's omnipresent, and it's commenting. And it comments in terms of our feeling function. You don't choose your feelings. Feelings are autonomous responses to what has happened. You can repress them, suppress them, anesthetize them, project them onto others, but you are, in the end, a creature that has an autonomous feeling response. Secondly, we have energy systems. If I'm doing what's right for me, the energy's there, the flow is there. We can mobilize our energy, and we have to in life, to get up and feed the baby at 2 a.m, or, put in our 40-hour week, or whatever the requirements are. But over time, forcing the energy system leads, as we know, to boredom and burnout and ultimately depression, often with self-medication attached to that. Thirdly, we have dreams, which comment. Fourthly, most importantly, is the question of meaning. If what we're doing is meaningful, as understood by the psyche, it will support us, even in the face of suffering and sacrifice and so forth. If what we're doing is wrong, as seen by the psyche, then over time it begins to pathologize. So you take that word psychopathology, literally from the Greek it means the expression of the suffering of the soul, which I think is revelatory. The expression of the suffering of the soul. Now, that seems to me obligatory to take seriously. If my soul, and again, that's a metaphor, people look for the soul throughout history, and you can't find it in the pineal gland, for example. The soul's a metaphor for the organic wisdom of that natural being that we are. The soul is a metaphor for this purposeful expression of the organism. It is purposeful. In other words, the question that occupies all of us in childhood and throughout the first half of life at least, if not an entire lifetime, is what does the world want of me? What do my parents want of me? What do my school teacher want? What do the playmates expect of me? What does the partner want from me? What does the employer want? All of these are reality-based encounters with the demands of the environment. And part of what we have to do is develop enough ego strength to create a provisional sense of self and a provisional functional self to deal with those expectations. But then when you've done that, why are you still here? What's the purpose? Are you simply here to be a creature of adaptation? Now, without those adaptations, we would be overwhelmed typically by the circumstances of our lives, and we accommodate them in some way. But in the second half of life, and I'm using that term very loosely, the real question is, what does the soul want to do? What does the psyche want to do? That's a different question. Then the issue comes up, what is it that is wishing expression in the world through me? That's a different question than what is the world asking. The people that we would most admire in history are people who in some way found and lived out what the soul was asking them. It didn't spare them from suffering, sometimes even martyrdom. It doesn't spare you from conflict and pain, maybe isolation, maybe exile, but you're fed by the purposefulness of it. Take that away, and life is pretty empty. And of course, we live in a culture where there's this enormous barrage of external stimuli. Well, buy this, purchase that, do this or that, the latest thing and this or that, the newest shiny thing. And the more I'm seeking to define myself through that environmental summons, the more likely I'm going to be estranged from something inside. All of us know it, but we don't know what to do about that at some level. And typically it has to hurt enough inside to bring a person into therapy. People don't just walk in and say, well, I was in the neighborhood and I thought I'd pop in and talk to a total stranger, pay him some money, and then, walk out as a different person. It doesn't work that way. I've often said to people, this is not about curing you because you're not a disease. This is about making your life more interesting, where you realize every morning you get up, you have something profound to address today. Why am I here? And in service to what? Because if you don't ask that question, you're going to be in service to your adaptive postures from childhood, as many people prove to be, until the conflict within reaches that point where the suffering of the soul, psychopathology, is sufficient. I myself was cruising along in my 30s. I'd achieved everything that I wanted to achieve and was enjoying my life, and then suddenly, inexplicably, had a very serious depression. And it took me a while to realize that I was asking the wrong question. The first question that occurs to a person under those circumstances is, how quickly do I get rid of this? Give me 5 easy steps or a pill for that or whatever. I didn't understand. The real question is, why has your psyche autonomously withdrawn its approval and support from the agenda that you've been addressing? It was a good agenda. Nothing wrong with it, but there was something else that was missing in this process. And it took a depression, like something from below reached up and pulled me down. Something was being pressed down. That's depression. And at the bottom of that well, there's always a task. There's always an issue, the identification of which can lead one into a new place in one's life, a different journey. In my case, it led me to leave a very fine tenured position in academia, travel to Switzerland, and spend several years there in retraining as a psychoanalyst. And I now look upon that depression as beneficent, but at the time I certainly didn't, as you can imagine.
I'd like to take a brief break and acknowledge our sponsor, AG1. By now, most of you have heard me tell my story about how I've been taking AG1 once or twice a day, every day, since 2012. And indeed, that's true. I started taking AG1, and I still take AG1 once or twice a day because it gives me vitamins and minerals that I might not be getting enough of from whole foods that I eat, as well as adaptogens and micronutrients. Those adaptogens and micronutrients are really critical because even though I strive to eat most of my foods from unprocessed or minimally processed whole foods, it's often hard to do so, especially when I'm traveling, especially when I'm busy. So by drinking a packet of AG1 in the morning, and oftentimes also again in the afternoon or evening, I'm ensuring that I'm getting everything I need. I'm covering all of my foundational nutritional needs. And I, like so many other people that take AG1 regularly, just report feeling better. And that shouldn't be surprising because it supports gut health, and of course gut health supports immune system health and brain health, and it's supporting a ton of different cellular and organ processes that all interact with one another. So while certain supplements are really directed towards one specific outcome, like sleeping better or being more alert, AG1 really is foundational nutritional support. It's really designed to support all of the systems of your brain and body that relate to mental health and physical health. If you'd like to try AG1, you can go to drinkag1.com/Huberman to claim a special offer. They'll give you 5 free travel packs with your order, plus a year's supply of vitamin D3 K2. Again, that's drinkag1.com/Huberman.
So if our task is to get in touch with this kind of yearning of the soul, to perhaps do some reparative work from our childhood, or at least understand our parent-child relationships, and then in an ideal circumstance to express ourselves through some higher calling, if you will. But higher meaning for us or for the world, hopefully both. That would be ideal. in terms of the day, you said you can wake up in the morning, presumably some of the residual thought processes and emotions from a dream or dreams still live within us early in the day. And then we start going about our day doing the practical things, making a cup of coffee, drinking the water, getting some sunshine, these sorts of things. How is it that the typical person, any of us, can think about segmenting our thinking and our actions in a way that we're touching into the deeper meaning of life while also carrying out a life? Because as you know, and I know, and everybody listening and watching knows, that there's stuff to do. We need to often get an education, make a living, tend to people around us, tend to ourselves, and it becomes a kind of a neuroscience problem in my mind, right? Different brain circuitries for different types of thinking. And if I may, I think it also becomes a time perception problem. The brain, a human brain, to me, is so magnificent at setting milestones that are like, get in the shower, finish the shower, check the text messages, talk to somebody, and get about the day. The milestones become very close in, and then if we're lucky enough to be able to take a walk and reflect, put the phone away, etc., then our mind can expand into, gosh, why am I here? What about that thing my grandfather said to me, or my grandmother said to me? And the ability to place our perception in larger or smaller time bins seems very closely linked to all of this. And to the sense of mortality, which we'll certainly talk about in a little bit, but in a kind of a practical way, in the absence of a daily therapy session, how do you suggest people start to segment or compartmentalize in a way that's functional? For instance, should people set aside 15 minutes each morning to just think about why they're on this earth? Why they're doing and what they're doing, as opposed to just doing?
Sure. Well, this is the central problem of our time. Is everybody's going to say, I don't have time for that. I had a colleague, now deceased, Marion Woodman in Toronto, who used to say to her clients, you have to guarantee me 1 hour per day that you reflect on your dreams, or you journal in terms of what's going on in your life. And she said, always people say, I don't have time for that. Then she said, then you don't have time for therapy. You're not making any priority here for this. And you're right. The claims of, Wordsworth wrote in 1802, the world is too much with us, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. This is 1802, before the internet, right? With all of its claims upon us. There's such a noisy din around us. We're all distracted by that, you see. That's why it usually takes a crisis in a marriage or depression or whatever the case may be to get people to pull out of that and reflect upon that. So I spend 15 minutes every morning before starting, just meditating, particularly working on a dream if I've had a dream. And secondly, I reflect on things in the evening too, because one of the things we want to try to do is to say, what are the stories I'm living here? One of them, I've got to earn a living. One of them, I've got to do this. Another one, I have to do that, you see. But what's all of that frenzy about, you see? That's why I think the first half of life, and I say this semi-humorously, is a huge and unavoidable mistake, because we're living just reactively. See, it's not generative. It's reacting to whatever's going on around us. Is one's entire life to be spent reacting to things? Now, when you're young, there's only so much ego strength to reflect upon this. A number of years ago, I was asked to give a talk to an advanced group of college students at a university on the psychodynamics of love. Well, they were all interested about love, I can tell you, right? So it was a 3-hour seminar. So the first 90 minutes, we talked about projection, transference, all these. They got it. They were smart kids. And then we took a short break. When we came back, and I said, now let's apply these ideas to your current or recent relationships. It was like the curtain came down. They were 19, 20, 21, 22, in that area. They couldn't bear. They could get the idea, but they couldn't bear to look at themselves with that kind of scrutiny. Flash forward 20 years when they're 40 and their marriage just dissolved, or the relationship has hardships of one kind or another, they're much more likely to be able to have enough ego strength to bear looking at oneself. Secondly, there's enough life experience to reflect upon, because this kind of work takes courage in the first place. I have to be able to bear to look at myself and see what's there, which won't always be pretty. And secondly, it's humbling.